Hello, BookTube. We're continuing with my 2023 library tour that is increasingly less and less pointed. Increasingly, it is more and more irrelevant as the collection in this room shifts and changes. The whole point of making a record was so I would know what I had, but it's changing right underneath me as I go. But we're going to keep going, at least for a little while. We're going to keep going. I'm going to be reaching out of camera range once again, but it's not that bad. Okay, first one is Bern Heinrich. This is his classic Ravens in Winter. All about, he did a couple of books on ravens, and they are great. They are fantastic. They have his illustrations in them. He's a great bird naturalist anyway. This has always been a favorite of mine. Used to hand sell it at the bookstore. Then this next one is trade paperback. Oh, okay, great. All right, this is... We've already seen this. This is a second copy of this great old trade paperback of M. John Harrison's Veraconium stories. His high fantasy post-apocalyptic stories about the afternoon cultures and the city of Veraconium. Just absolutely delightful stuff in this beautiful trade paperback with the deckled edges and the French flaps. So I have two of those. I love the... where's the other one? I love the trade paperback, but I don't need two copies of it. I especially don't need two copies in here, where space is supposed to be at a premium. It's clearly not. Okay, this next one is more modern. This is recent. What's the date on this? 2019. This is Saving Jemima by Julie Zickfuss. This is another in the example of a book we've already seen plenty of times in this little bit of a library tour that we've seen so far, which is this sort of sub-genre of people taking wild animals into their home and observing them and coming to know and like them, etc., etc. And this is about a blue jay that the owner takes in. So there are illustrations all throughout here. There are photographs, but there are also illustrations. So it's a lovely volume, and it's also... Oh, there's the author. The author right there. It's also utterly touching, as these books almost always are. So I knew already in 2019 that I wanted it, in here. That it's a book that I want to keep and go back to all the time. That it became a favorite. Okay, then we have Dennis and Marion Chatham. This is Cape Coddities, a cute little volume from I want to say a century ago. Yeah, 1920. Illustrations in there are hand-drawn things, sketches of old Cape Cod, in the teens, in the 19-teens. I've mentioned before, we've seen many books on Cape Cod so far, that one of the favorite things for Cape Cod people to do is complain about how the Cape really isn't what it used to be. And they've been doing that forever. They've been doing that for 300 years. So this is an example of that. It's utterly charming. And one of the fun parts in a book like this, for someone like me, is to sift through for what has changed. Because the Cape, people are always complaining that the Cape isn't what it used to be, but the Cape does change. And it's always fascinating looking at a book like this to sift through what has changed and what hasn't. Oh, great. Okay. This, believe it or not, is a double. This is, I found this last summer. But it is a double of a book that I have elsewhere in my collection. And only the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston would you find a double of this. It's the only bookshop in the world where you find one copy, much less two. But I found this. This is John Buxton's Sir Philip Sidney and the English Renaissance. A really good biographical and literary study of Sir Philip Sidney. Really, really enjoyable to read. In a scholarly vein. I mean, it's on a scholarly wavelength, but it's really good as an example of that. Just a trade paperback. I found a trade paperback of this probably 15 years ago. And I'd read it before at a library, and I read that volume. When did this come out? 1940s, I want to say. I read the volume that I originally found 1954. Okay, so, and then I found a trade paperback about 15 or 20 years ago, and I got it, and I annotated it, and I'm pretty hard on my things. And then just recently, just last summer, I found a perfect condition new trade paperback. New condition. It's not you. It's an old book, but it feels like it just came off the presses. So that's great. Although that means there's a double in here somewhere of what? Oh. Huh. Okay. Okay. I pulled down a book and I pulled down a photo as well. I pulled down a photo. I don't know what that's doing there. I'm going to put it somewhere else. I'm going to put it back on the shelf. Let's just go on. Let's not stop the video. Let's just go on. This is a great University of Chicago Press trade paperback. They did a reprint of The Last Hurrah by Edwin O'Connor, and they got Jack Beatty, the great biographer of Mayor James Michael Curley, who is pretty much the real world template for the character in this book. They got him to write the introduction. I was very happy with how pretty a volume this is. How just lovely that people at the University of Chicago Press had to have among their number a true believer or two who really wanted a really good new edition of this book to be in print. The previous edition was a mass market paperback long before this came out, so I was overjoyed to see it. Just overjoyed. Really, really good, solid production. Okay, then we have a trade paperback of David Carnadine's History in Our Time. This is a Penguin trade paperback, I think from the UK. This is from the UK, and Carnadine he reviewed books. So he would review a book for the London Review of Books or TLS or whoever. And he had a bailiwick of reviews. If you got a new book on Princess Diana or on the travails of the royal house or Victoria or something like that, you would send it to him and get a really lively review. And he collected those in this volume, which is infinitely quotable. You could underline almost every page in this book. And I don't have... I don't quite know why it's in here. It shouldn't be in this room. So maybe I'll put it aside here. But Carnadine's really good. If you're ever at a used bookstore, for instance, or at your library, and you see something by him, he's one of those rare authors, especially rare in history, where their name is enough. You don't need to care about the subject to you're going to love the book if his name is on it. Okay, then we have Served Cold. This is a horror tube anthology. A bunch of booktubers who write horror wrote stories for this anthology. I wrote the foreword. Regina St. Clair put this together. I wrote the foreword, and also in a very small bit of collectability, I also have a short story in here, which I've only done one time before. It had been 20 years since my previous short story. My previous short story appeared in The Lifted Brow in Australia. And then there's The Cold Traps in this book. So that's two. That's two short stories. I'm not often moved to do it. So it doesn't happen all that often. Steve Donoghue completists pretty much have to own a copy of Served Cold. Then we have Jerusalem by Alan Moore. This is the paperback from... you're not going to tell me a date. No, September 2018. This is the trade paperback. The U.S. trade paperback is a lovely, beautiful thing. Looks and is designed so much better than the U.S. hardcover. This is a gigantic novel by Moore that missed me completely the first time I read it. Just went right by me. I confess, it wasn't until I got this trade paperback I really wanted to read it. So I got this trade paperback and read it again, and that's when I noticed all the brilliance in here. It's an amazing book, not just a doorstop, but an amazing book. A perfect example. I mean, the U.S. hardcover of this was not only ugly, but it was poorly designed. The cover board started to pop off while I was reading it. You got a book this big, 1,100 pages. You want it to be able to take some punishment, and that U.S. hardcover couldn't. I got rid of the U.S. hardcover and just thought that would be the end of it. I thought I was done with the book. Then I got the trade paperback and read it again and realized, in addition to the fact that the trade paperback was so much prettier, also the doors were open for me to how good a book it is. Okay, this next one was a gift from Sarah at the Bookish Knitter. I saw this on her channel, Naughty Brits, series of contemporary romance short stories about hot British guys, which is almost a contradiction in terms. They have 1 minute when they're about 17. After that, they all look like Prince Charles or King Charles. But I saw this. She was talking about this in one of her... this is a booktube book, completely. I would never have known about it. if I didn't see it on her channel. Saw it on her channel, immediately wanted it. I did what a lot of you do, which is to go, to Amazon or whatever and immediately look for the book and realize that it was hard to come by. Very hard to come by. It's a UK production. So it's distributed in Canada, where Sarah is, but not here. And I lamented that to her, and she offered to send it to me, which is very, very nice of her. Then we have Richardson Wright. This is his book, The Gardener's Bed Book. This is yet another. We've seen, I think, 2 so far. Yet another gardening book. I went through a period a few years ago. I went through it publicly on this channel where I was contemplating becoming a gardener. I had a great little patch of ground. I was comparing notes with all of you avid gardeners out there as to how to start and what to do and what to grow and what not to do. And eventually I realized that what I really wanted to do was just read about gardening as opposed to, going to the bother of actually gardening. So when I didn't know that, when I thought that my flirtation with gardening was real and that I would actually end up on my knees in the dirt digging around with the roots and the worms, when I thought that was real, all of a sudden I was wide open to new books about gardening at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. A haunt of mine, a home away from home. I always see gardening books there. Never really thought to pay any attention to them. And then all of a sudden, when gardening felt like it was a personal reality, I did pay attention to them. And I'm glad I did, because we saw it on this channel very early on, Onward and Upward in the Garden. I'd read that when I had no thought of gardening, and I loved it. But I'd never really thought about reading any other gardening books, and then I did. This is terrific. This is an oldie. This is just a series of little reflections that gardeners love to have and love, I guess, to write about. 1939, almost 100 years old, but delightful. No, this shouldn't be happening. This is another example of a double. This is From Holmes to Sherlock. Once again, we saw this. Yeah, here it is, right here. We don't want doubles. We don't want doubles here at all. This is From Holmes to Sherlock. I have 2 copies of this. That's not good. Okay, so, well, you will probably, oh God, that's you inviting me to go back in there. Well, that's the problem with a double. You'll remember what I said about this. This is a huge and incredibly engaging story of Sherlock Holmes on the stage, the screen, the big screen, the small screen, everything. And it's amazingly good. No matter what your favorite Sherlock Holmes is, it's amazingly good. Then we have this thing. These were once very, very common. This is Around the World in 2,000 Pictures. And the cover is color, but the book is all black and white. It's all black and white photos of a million different places in the world that I will never see again. These pictures were probably taken at around the time when I was seeing a lot of these sites. And that these things are the closest I will come. So I love them, especially if they have a certain vintage. They'll usually have a certain level of intelligence that, to put it mildly, pictorial guidebooks, travel books don't tend to have nowadays. So I grabbed that. I love flipping through it. Okay. All right. This is an oddity. This was never for general sale. This is Gone for the Day by Ned Smith. This is a collection. See, it doesn't have any. It was meant to be given away, I think, to subscribers, to Game News. It's full of great illustrations where the author just talks about his outdoor adventures. Hunting, but also tracking around, walking around with his dogs and whatnot. See, I imagine that was the header for the column. Just a regular column. Was it Game News? Yeah, Game News. I don't know if Game News is still published. I found this at the Brattle probably 20 years ago. Or no, I found this at the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut in 2009. So I've been to the Book Barn a few times. I always wonder when my last trip will be. A couple of years ago, Mark Richardson and I went there. We drove all the way from his home in Vermont with the Bean. Frida has been to the Book Barn. She has seen their animal array. And we shopped there and then drove all the way back home. I found this there. I don't even remember who I went with in 2009. But it's a collection of columns, and it's utterly delightful. I was overjoyed with it. I wrote about it, but in the olden days of my old Steve Reads literary blog, God knows if that's findable. I don't have any idea if any of that stuff is findable. It'd be a shame if it were unfindable, because that was 10 years of writing about anything that came to hand. Well, not new releases, but anything that came to hand. I should look and see. I'll try to remind myself to look and see. But that is The Shelf. So we're going to move on. Thank you, BookTube.